Donald Trump's second presidency began on January 20, 2025, when he was inaugurated as the 47th President of the United States. It was a rare political comeback. Trump had already served as the 45th president from 2017 to 2021, lost the 2020 election to Joe Biden, and then returned to the White House after defeating Kamala Harris in 2024. That made him only the second former U.S. president to regain the office after leaving it. But this second term did not begin as a simple sequel to the first. It opened with a very different political environment, a more prepared administration, and a Republican Party that also held simple majorities in both the House of Representatives and the Senate. That gave Trump what is often called a federal trifecta: control of the presidency and both chambers of Congress. The significance of that trifecta is hard to overstate. In the American system, presidents can act alone in some areas, but major legislation usually requires Congress. With Republicans controlling both chambers, Trump entered office with a stronger path to passing laws, confirming officials, and shaping national priorities. Even narrow majorities can matter because they affect committee control, budget negotiations, investigations, and the speed at which nominations move forward. But a trifecta does not mean unlimited power. Courts can still block executive actions, lawmakers can still fracture internally, and public opinion can still shape what is politically possible. Trump's second presidency quickly became defined by the tension between those two forces: an administration determined to move aggressively, and institutions testing how far that movement could legally go. One of the clearest signs of Trump's governing style in this term was the extraordinary use of executive orders. During 2025, he signed 225 executive orders, described in the source article as the most by any president in a single year since Franklin D. Roosevelt. Executive orders are directives issued by the president to manage the federal government, and they can have major policy consequences. But they are also vulnerable to legal challenges if courts find that they exceed statutory or constitutional authority. Many of Trump's orders were challenged in court, making litigation a constant feature of the administration's first year. This created a cycle: the White House announced a sweeping action, opponents sued, judges reviewed it, and the administration either revised, defended, or escalated its position. That conflict with the judiciary became one of the defining themes of the second presidency. Critics argued that Trump was trying to expand presidential power beyond traditional limits, while supporters saw the administration as using every available tool to deliver on campaign promises. In practice, the courts became a central arena for deciding what the president could and could not do. Legal disputes touched immigration, federal employment, agency authority, spending, and constitutional rights. The broader question was not only whether one policy was valid, but how much discretion a president should have to reshape the government without new legislation. This placed the separation of powers at the center of national politics. The presidency, Congress, and the courts were no longer just background institutions, they became the story itself. Immigration was one of the administration's most aggressive policy areas. Trump signed the Laken-Riley Act into law, a measure associated with tougher enforcement and detention rules for certain non-citizens accused of crimes. The administration also attempted to restrict birthright citizenship, challenging a long-standing interpretation of the 14th Amendment that generally grants citizenship to people born on U.S. soil. That move immediately raised major constitutional questions because birthright citizenship is deeply embedded in American legal history. At the same time, Trump ordered mass deportations of immigrants, making enforcement a central symbol of his second term. Supporters framed these policies as necessary for public safety and border control. Critics warned that they risked violating due process, separating families, and expanding federal power in ways that could affect citizens and non-citizens alike. Another major initiative was the launch of the Department of Government Efficiency, known as DOGE. Created in January 2025, DOGE was tasked with reducing federal spending and shrinking the size of government. Elon Musk briefly oversaw it, giving the initiative a highly visible and unconventional profile. DOGE pursued mass layoffs of civil servants and oversaw the closing of agencies, including the Agency for International Development. To supporters, this represented a long-promised effort to cut bureaucracy, reduce waste, and force the federal government to operate more like a lean private organization. To opponents, it threatened institutional expertise, disrupted public services, and concentrated too much decision-making power in a rapid restructuring process. The debate over DOGE was really a debate over what the federal government is for, and who gets to dismantle parts of it. On fiscal policy, Trump signed the One Big Beautiful Bill Act into law. According to the source article, the law permanently extended tax cuts introduced during Trump's first administration, while increasing the deficit by around $3 trillion by 2034. Tax cuts are politically powerful because they can put more money in the hands of households and businesses, at least in the short term. But when they are not fully offset by spending cuts or new revenue, they can also increase federal borrowing. That creates long-term trade-offs. Supporters argued the tax policy would encourage investment, economic growth, and business confidence. Critics argued it favored higher earners and corporations while worsening the national debt. The bill became a centerpiece of the administration's economic identity: lower taxes, smaller government, and a willingness to accept larger deficits. Trade policy also returned to the center of national debate. Trump oversaw a series of tariff increases and pauses, continuing a style of economic nationalism associated with his first term. Tariffs are taxes on imported goods, and presidents often use them to pressure other countries or protect domestic industries. But they also raise costs for importers, and those costs can be passed on to consumers. The source article notes that the tariff moves led to retaliatory tariffs from other countries and stock market volatility. That volatility reflected uncertainty. Businesses had to plan around changing costs, investors reacted to trade tensions, and foreign governments responded with pressure of their own. For Trump, tariffs were a tool of leverage. For critics, they were a source of instability in an already fragile global economy. In foreign affairs, the second Trump presidency pursued a more aggressive and expansionist posture. The administration increased support for Israel during the Gaza war, struck Houthi targets in Yemen from March to May 2025, and aided Israel in the June 2025 12-day war. During that conflict, Trump carried out strikes on Iranian nuclear sites. In early October 2025, a Trump-backed plan for a Gaza ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas was signed. These actions showed a willingness to use American power directly and to align strongly with regional partners. Supporters viewed this as deterrence and decisive leadership. Critics saw an elevated risk of wider war, especially when military action involved Iran or armed groups connected to broader regional conflicts. The administration's foreign policy emphasized force, pressure, and visible displays of strength. The administration also authorized strikes on suspected drug traffickers in the Caribbean Sea, actions the source article says were widely disputed under both U.S. and international law. The legal controversy centered on whether the president had sufficient authority to use military force in this context, especially outside a traditional battlefield. The article further describes a military intervention aimed at overthrowing and capturing Nicolas Maduro, the disputed president of Venezuela, with the administration alleging links between Maduro's government and narco-terrorist networks. After the raid, the source says Venezuela became a de facto U.S. puppet state under the control of Secretary of State Marco Rubio. These claims represent some of the most dramatic foreign policy developments described in the article, raising questions about sovereignty, intervention, and the limits of American power in the hemisphere. The article also describes a major escalation involving Iran in February 2026. According to the source, Trump launched a major attack on Iran with Israel, with the stated goal of regime change, including the assassination of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. This reportedly led to the 2026 Strait of Hormuz crisis and a fuel crisis. The Strait of Hormuz is one of the world's most important energy choke points, so instability there can affect oil shipments, fuel prices, and global markets. A crisis in that region would not remain local for long. It would affect military alliances, energy security, shipping routes, and domestic politics around the world. The episode fits the broader pattern described in the article, a second Trump administration more willing to use force, accept escalation, and challenge existing international norms. Beyond individual policies, the second presidency became a larger argument over democracy, corruption, and the boundaries of executive authority. The administration was criticized for targeting political opponents and civil society, and many of its actions were found by courts to be illegal or unconstitutional. Critics described the governing style as authoritarian or fascistic, warning that it contributed to democratic backsliding. The article also notes unprecedented allegations of corruption, conflicts of interest, and self-enrichment involving Trump, his family, and his administration. Trump entered office as the first president with a felony conviction, following his 2024 conviction for falsifying business records connected to hush money payments. He also became the oldest person to assume the presidency, at 78 years and 7 months. Taken together, these facts made his second presidency not just a political comeback, but a stress test for American institutions. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.